Most people think a healed empath becomes softer, kinder, more open to the world. Carl Jung discovered the exact opposite. When an empath heals completely, they don't become a saint. They become a fortress. Jung called this shadow integration, and it terrified him because he realized something dangerous. The person who once absorbed everyone's pain, who felt everything, who carried the weight of every room they entered, suddenly stops. They stop absorbing, they stop carrying, they stop bending. And when that happens, Jung discovered, they become the most psychologically powerful people on earth. What happens when the person who feels everything finally decides to stop letting it destroy them? Jung's clinical files reveal a pattern he documented across dozens of cases. Empaths arrived at his Zurich practice carrying identical wounds. They had spent their entire lives serving as what Jung called emotional shock absorbers for toxic families, manipulative partners, and dysfunctional social systems. They absorbed rage so others could stay calm. They absorbed pain so others could avoid discomfort. They absorbed chaos so others could maintain their illusions of peace. Jung observed something that made his hands shake as he wrote his notes. These empaths weren't just surviving abuse, they were cataloging it. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every lie, every emotional attack had been recorded in their minds with surgical precision. They knew their abusers' triggers, insecurities, deepest fears, and hidden motivations better than the abusers knew themselves. They had mapped emotional patterns, identified psychological weaknesses, and documented behavioral cycles with an accuracy that stunned Jung. And they had never used this knowledge, not once, until something pushed them past their breaking point. Jung realized the unhealed empath exists in a state of compulsive giving. They can't say no. They can't establish boundaries. They can't protect their own energy because they've been conditioned to believe their value comes from serving others. Society teaches empaths that their sensitivity is a gift meant to heal the world. Religious traditions tell them to turn the other cheek, to forgive endlessly, to sacrifice themselves for others. Family systems exploit their willingness to absorb dysfunction so everyone else can avoid dealing with their own shadows. The unhealed empath becomes a psychological dumping ground, accepting toxic emotional waste from everyone around them, while their own inner world slowly suffocates under the weight of absorbed pain. Jung documented how this pattern destroys empaths systematically. First, they lose connection to their own emotions because they're too busy processing everyone else's feelings. Then, they lose their ability to trust their own perceptions because manipulators gaslight them constantly. Finally, they lose their sense of self entirely, becoming whatever others need them to be, while their authentic personality disappears into the background. This state of constant absorption creates what Jung termed psychological fragmentation. The empath's consciousness becomes so scattered across other people's emotional experiences that they can no longer locate their own center. They wake up feeling emotions that don't belong to them. They carry anxiety about problems that aren't theirs to solve. They experience guilt about boundaries they haven't even set yet. Jung observed that unhealed empaths often describe feeling like they're living someone else's life, watching themselves go through motions without any real sense of agency or choice. This fragmentation makes them perfect targets for manipulation because they've lost the internal compass that would normally guide them away from danger. But Jung discovered that empaths possess a hidden psychological mechanism that activates under extreme duress. He called it the clarity event. This moment occurs when the empath's pattern recognition system finally overwhelms their need to believe the best in people. Usually, a deep betrayal triggers this awakening. The empath discovers infidelity, financial manipulation, or emotional abuse from someone they trusted completely. What makes it devastating isn't the betrayal itself. It's the realization that they saw the signs all along and ignored them. They watched the micro-expressions that revealed lies. They felt the energetic shifts that indicated deception. They sensed the emotional incongruence that exposed hidden agendas, but they dismissed their own accurate perceptions because they wanted to believe in the person's goodness. The clarity event happens when this cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable. The empath can no longer deny what they've known all along. And in that moment, Jung observed, something fundamental shifts in their psychology. Most people expect empaths to cry, to scream, to fall apart emotionally when they finally acknowledge the truth. Their abusers certainly expect that response. Manipulators are prepared for emotional chaos because they've successfully triggered it before. What happens instead is something that terrifies everyone involved. The empaths become unnaturally calm. Their emotional reactivity disappears completely. Jung described this transformation as the moment the victim realizes they've been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers. The healed empath stops trying to convince others of the truth. They stop explaining their perceptions. They stop defending their reality. They simply begin to use the database they've been building for years. And Jung documented what happened next as the most chilling psychological transformation he ever witnessed in his clinical practice. The healed empath develops what Jung called differentiated perception. This isn't anxiety or paranoia. It's accurate data processing at a level that most humans never achieve. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. Jung observed that empaths who complete shadow integration can spot lies instantly, detect hidden agendas within minutes, and perceive psychological patterns that remain invisible to others. They see the depression behind forced smiles. They sense the desperation beneath confident presentations. They feel the collective shadow that groups unconsciously agree to ignore. But unlike their unhealed state where this perception overwhelmed them, now they process it consciously. They trust what they see completely. They no longer second-guess their intuition or dismiss their gut feelings to make others comfortable. This creates what Jung called psychological invincibility. The healed empath cannot be gaslighted because they trust their own reality. Absolutely. They cannot be manipulated because they see emotional games before they're fully formed. They cannot be broken because they've already been to the bottom and emerged stronger. Jung spent years studying how this differentiated perception actually functions in healed empaths. He discovered that their brains process social information through multiple channels simultaneously. While most people focus on conscious verbal communication, healed empaths simultaneously track body language, vocal tonality, energetic presence, unconscious motivations, and systemic patterns. They're not doing this analytically or consciously. Their nervous systems have been trained through years of survival in toxic environments to read danger signals that others miss completely. What once served as a trauma response now functions as a sophisticated early warning system. The difference is that healed empaths have learned to trust this system rather than dismiss it as anxiety or overthinking. Jung identified a phenomenon he called the mirror effect. People who previously felt comfortable around the unhealed empath suddenly become uncomfortable around the healed version. Nothing has changed in the empath's behavior. They're not aggressive, not cruel, not openly judgmental. But toxic people feel exposed in their presence. Jung realized this happens because the healed empath becomes what he called a darkened mirror. They reflect people's true nature back to them without saying a word. Manipulators see their own manipulation reflected. Narcissists see their own self-absorption reflected. Dishonest people see their own deception reflected. This reflection occurs through what Jung termed participation mystique, but in reverse. Instead of absorbing others' unconscious contents, the healed empath now reflects them back, and most people cannot bear to see their own shadow so clearly displayed. This explains why toxic people avoid healed empaths instinctively. They can't articulate why they feel uncomfortable. They just know that being around this person makes them feel seen in ways they don't want to be seen. The transformation from compulsive giving to conscious choice represents what Jung called strategic empathy. The healed empath is still capable of deep compassion, profound kindness, and genuine care for others. But now they're selectively empathetic. They've developed boundaries that cannot be crossed. They've learned to protect their energy fiercely. They've mastered the ability to say no without guilt, to walk away from toxicity without explanation, to choose themselves without apology. Jung observed that this shift terrifies people who benefited from the empath's previous lack of boundaries. Family members who relied on the empath as an emotional dumping ground suddenly have nowhere to deposit their unprocessed pain. Partners who exploited the empath's willingness to absorb abuse suddenly face someone who refuses to participate in dysfunctional dynamics. Friends who use the empath as a free therapist suddenly encounter someone who values their own time and energy. The healed empath hasn't become cold or cruel. They've simply stopped sacrificing themselves to maintain others' comfort. Jung documented specific techniques that healed empaths naturally develop for maintaining their boundaries. They learn to create what he called psychological containers, spaces where they can temporarily hold others' emotions without absorbing them permanently. They master the art of compassionate detachment, caring about someone's pain without making it their responsibility to fix. They develop energetic discernment, the ability to sense when someone wants genuine connection versus when they're seeking a dumping ground. These skills don't diminish the empath's capacity for love. They enhance it by ensuring the empath can sustain their caring without depleting themselves completely. Jung wrestled with a disturbing question throughout his research on healed empaths. Could this transformation turn someone into a narcissist? The concern seemed valid. Both healed empaths and narcissists establish strong boundaries, refuse to absorb others' emotions, and maintain psychological distance from manipulation. But Jung identified a crucial difference. The narcissist projects their shadow onto others and remains unconscious of their own darkness. The healed empath has integrated their shadow and become fully conscious of their capacity for destruction. They know exactly how to hurt someone because they've spent years cataloging human vulnerabilities. They understand manipulation because they've been on the receiving end of every toxic tactic. They could devastate someone emotionally with surgical precision if they chose to, but they choose peace instead. This conscious choice, Jung realized, is what makes them truly powerful. The narcissist lacks empathy because they're unconscious of others' inner worlds. The healed empath possesses empathy, but chooses when and how to deploy it. That choice transforms sensitivity from a weakness into a weapon they control completely. Jung documented the concept of warrior consciousness emerging in healed empaths. This psychological state combines the empath's natural sensitivity with a newfound capacity for strategic action. The warrior empath can still feel everything, but they're no longer destroyed by what they feel. They can still see everything, but they're no longer overwhelmed by what they see. They've learned to channel their perceptive abilities into conscious decision-making rather than compulsive people-pleasing. Jung observed that warrior consciousness manifests as an unshakable inner authority. The healed empath no longer seeks external validation for their perceptions. They don't need others to confirm what they know. They don't require permission to trust their own reality. This internal validation creates a psychological foundation that cannot be undermined by gaslighting, manipulation, or social pressure. The warrior empath becomes immune to the tactics that previously controlled them. The warrior consciousness that Jung identified goes deeper than simple self-protection. It represents a complete reorganization of the empath's relationship to their own power. In the unhealed state, empaths often fear their own strength because they've been taught that power corrupts and that truly good people remain humble and self-effacing. Jung discovered that this belief system keeps empaths trapped in victimhood. The healed empath realizes that power itself is neutral. It's how you use power that determines its morality. They reclaim their strength not to dominate others, but to protect themselves and serve from a place of fullness rather than depletion. This shift allows them to become what Jung called benevolent warriors, people who wield their power consciously in service of life, rather than unconsciously in service of dysfunction. The journey from broken sponge to awakened warrior follows a predictable pattern Jung mapped across his clinical cases. First comes recognition. The empath acknowledges their suppressed shadow aspects, not just their anger, but their intelligence, their strength, their right to exist without serving others constantly. They stop pathologizing their perceptions and start trusting their emotional intelligence as the sophisticated data processing system it actually is. Second comes integration. The empath merges their light and shadow aspects into what Jung called the complete self. They become someone who can be incredibly kind to those who deserve it and ruthlessly precise with those who don't. Third comes application. The healed empath learns to use their abilities strategically rather than defensively. They develop what Jung privately called psychological architecture, the ability to read, influence, and navigate human systems with supernatural precision. Finally comes selective service. The integrated empath doesn't become cold or disconnected. They become consciously generous with their gifts, using their abilities to help other empaths transform, while maintaining impenetrable boundaries against those who would exploit them. Jung realized that society conditions empaths to fear their own power. Religious teachings warn against pride and self-assertion. Cultural messages equate sensitivity with weakness and boundary setting with selfishness. Family systems punish empaths for refusing to absorb dysfunction. This conditioning creates what Jung called the perfect person problem. Empaths try desperately to be good, to meet everyone's needs, to maintain harmony at all costs. But Jung discovered that wholeness, not goodness, should be the goal. The healed empath stops trying to be perfect and starts trying to be complete. They accept their own capacity for darkness, which prevents them from projecting it onto others. They acknowledge their own potential for cruelty, which allows them to recognize it clearly in others. They integrate their own shadow completely, which eliminates the blind spots that manipulators exploit. This integration creates what Jung called the individuated self, a person who has moved beyond collective unconscious programming to claim their own psychological sovereignty. The healed empath's presence affects entire social systems, not just individual relationships. Jung documented how their transformation forces everyone around them to evolve or reveal their true nature. Healthy people grow stronger from the healed empath's example. They see someone who maintains boundaries without cruelty, who chooses themselves without apology, who trusts their perceptions without arrogance. This modeling gives healthy people permission to develop their own inner authority. Toxic people, however, expose themselves through desperate attempts to pull the healed empath back into old patterns. They employ every manipulation tactic they know. They guilt trip, they gaslight, they recruit others to pressure the empath into resuming their previous role. When these tactics fail, toxic people often escalate to direct attacks, trying to punish the empath for refusing to participate in dysfunction anymore. Jung observed that this escalation actually protects the healed empath by revealing clearly who cannot be trusted. Jung identified what he called negative synchronicity in unhealed empaths. They unconsciously orchestrate encounters that perpetuate their original trauma patterns. They attract narcissists, manipulators, and emotional vampires without understanding why. But healed empaths develop positive synchronicity. They begin attracting people who value authenticity, who respect boundaries, who appreciate depth. Jung realized this shift occurs because the healed empath no longer emits the energetic signature of a victim. They radiate self-possession instead of self-sacrifice. They project strength instead of availability for exploitation. This energetic shift repels toxic people before relationships even form, while attracting conscious individuals who can engage in genuine reciprocity. The question Jung wrestled with most deeply was whether empaths could maintain their healing permanently, or whether they would regress under stress. His clinical observations provided a clear answer. Empaths who consciously integrate their shadow maintain their transformation permanently. Unlike temporary coping strategies that collapse under pressure, shadow integration creates fundamental personality restructuring. The healed empath doesn't forget how to set boundaries during crisis. They don't revert to people-pleasing when faced with manipulation. The psychological foundation they've built remains stable because it's based on accepting reality rather than maintaining illusions. Jung documented cases of integrated empaths facing severe life challenges, relationship betrayals, and professional setbacks without losing their inner authority. Once you've seen through the veil of collective unconsciousness, Jung observed, you cannot unsee it. Once you've reclaimed your power, you cannot unknow your own strength. Jung believed that healed empaths serve an evolutionary function for human consciousness. They represent what humanity could become if we learn to integrate sensitivity with strength, compassion with boundaries, feeling with conscious choice. The unhealed empath gets destroyed by a world that exploits sensitivity. The healed empath transforms sensitivity into a superpower that cannot be weaponized against them. Jung saw this transformation as essential not just for individual well-being but for collective evolution. As more empaths heal and claim their power, they create a network of psychologically invincible individuals who cannot be manipulated by the unconscious forces that control most of humanity. This network serves as a counterbalance to collective shadow, a conscious resistance to mass manipulation, a living example of what integrated humanity looks like. The healed empath achieves what Jung called love with boundaries. They can care deeply while protecting themselves absolutely. They can feel everything without being destroyed by what they feel. They can see clearly without becoming cynical. They've learned that true compassion requires self-protection, that genuine kindness must include kindness toward oneself, that authentic service cannot exist without honoring your own needs. This integration resolves the false dichotomy between selfishness and selflessness. The healed empath transcends both by becoming consciously selective about where their energy flows. They're not selfless martyrs sacrificing themselves for others' comfort. They're not selfish narcissists exploiting others for personal gain. They're sovereign individuals who choose consciously how to engage with the world while maintaining their psychological integrity. Jung's case files reveal that healed empaths often experience a profound shift in how they relate to their past pain. Instead of viewing their suffering as meaningless trauma, they begin to see it as the crucible that forged their psychological strength. Every betrayal taught them discernment. Every manipulation sharpened their pattern recognition abilities. Every moment of gaslighting strengthened their commitment to trusting their own reality. Jung observed that this reframing doesn't minimize the harm that was done to them. It transforms that harm into wisdom that can protect them and others moving forward. The healed empath becomes living proof that your worst experiences can become your greatest teachers if you're willing to extract the lessons consciously. Jung's final insight about healed empaths still resonates through psychology today. These individuals didn't become different people. They became who they always were beneath the conditioning. Every empath carries within them the potential to become psychologically untouchable. The sensitivity that seemed like a curse is actually a gift that needs conscious development. The ability to feel everything becomes a superpower when combined with the wisdom to choose what deserves your energy. The capacity to see through people's masks becomes a protective shield when you learn to trust what you see. The transformation from victim to warrior isn't about losing your empathy. It's about gaining conscious control over how you deploy your empathic abilities. Jung discovered that the kindest people aren't weak. They're weapons waiting to be forged. And once forged through the fire of betrayal and shadow integration, they become forces of nature that cannot be controlled, manipulated, or broken. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness. It's your weapon. The day you learn to wield it consciously is the day you become truly powerful, not dangerous to innocent people, dangerous to those who would exploit your gifts. That's exactly what the world needs more of. Empaths who know their worth, trust their perceptions, and refuse to dim their light for anyone's comfort. The question isn't whether you'll transform. The question is whether you'll choose conscious transformation or let life force it upon you. Jung's research proves that transformation is inevitable for every empath. You'll either integrate your shadow deliberately through inner work, or life will shatter you until you have no choice but to rebuild yourself stronger. Either way, the awakening comes. The only question is how much unnecessary suffering you'll endure before you choose to heal. If you recognize yourself in this journey, if you're ready to stop being everyone's emotional shock absorber and start being your own sovereign self, comment below, "I choose conscious transformation." Let me know where you are in your healing process. Are you still in the unhealed phase, absorbing everyone's pain? Are you in the clarity event, finally seeing what you've known all along? Or have you already integrated your shadow and become the warrior empath Jung described? In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.